All right, everyone, welcome to the Eight Figure Product CEO. And we have a treat today. We have with us Eli Portnoy, who's founded and sold two companies, and now he's on his third. So he'll introduce himself in a minute here. Before we get started, again, this is the Eight Figure Product CEO. Practical strategies to scale, lead, and exit your physical product business. And head over to the website, apexceo.co. And over there, I have an exit readiness test. Okay, so it'll take you about 5 minutes. You plug in your answers about your leadership team, your finances, maybe EBITDA margins and some other information. And it's going to spit out a roadmap for how close you are to exit, if you wanted to exit, and where you should work on. So it'll kind of show your weaknesses, your strengths, and it's pretty cool. So I put that together from a founder's perspective, not a banker's perspective. And that's over at apexceo.co. Look for the exit readiness test. All right. Eli Portnoy is a 3-time founder. He's the CEO of Back Engine. That's an AI-powered customer feedback platform built for companies trying to scale without losing touch with their customers. So we're going to focus this on your physical product businesses today and learn about how you can get closer to the customer. Welcome, Eli.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else to add to that intro?
No, I think that was perfect.
Okay, cool. And before we get started, because I know everyone always wants to hear the juicy details, so we're just talking about this offline. So you've already exited two companies. I think one in the 20 million range and one in the 40 million range, right? Briefly, what do those companies do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one was ThinkNear. This was back in 2011. We built a location-based ad network effectively where, the phones were out. The iPhone had been out for a few years. The App Store was a couple of years old. The iPhone now had a GPS, and all of a sudden consumers were using their phones a ton for apps and games and all sorts of stuff. And advertisers were trying to figure out, how do I advertise in this tiny little screen? And what we said was, well, this is a portable device that people take with them everywhere, and it's very personal. So what you want to do is you want to understand where people are when they're looking at your ads and use that to come up with situationally relevant ads. And so we started building that, and there were massive tailwinds, and we were bought by a company called Telenav. And then the second company was a company called Sense 360, where we kind of looked at the success we had with ThinkNear, and we said, well, location data isn't just interesting for figuring out what ads to show someone. It's also really interesting just to be able to anonymously understand how people move about the world, which I thought would be really interesting to big, large retailers and brands who want to better understand their consumers. So we built a real-time consumer insights engine that we sold to a whole bunch of top restaurants and retailers, and that was bought by a company called Medallia back in 2020. So that's been the journey.
And you're back at it again. We were joking around because there's no good answer why you're doing this again. You don't need to, but you're back at it. So this is your third one. Hopefully you get a third exit here, and you are venture funded again. And how many years have you been at it with this one?
We're just about 2 years.
Okay, so if you guys followed that timeline, you didn't take much time off. You took less than a year off, basically.
3 months. I mean, the intention was to take at least a year off, but as soon as I started, my wife works and my kids were in school, and I just had too much time on my hands and not enough to do. And I kept feeling this gravitational pull towards building something in AI, and just started playing with stuff. And before I knew it, I was right back at it.
Okay, so so we talk about physical products. So this could be manufacturing, it could be Amazon, Shopify, wholesale, import, any of those things. A lot of these businesses have customer service. Some of them have phone support. All of them are going to have ticketing, email, and all that. So your product gets into both of those areas, right? So do you want to kind of briefly explain, because this is sort of to set the table here. If you're a CEO running a business, you're collecting all this data, and then we always want to know about reviews, but there's so much more information in there. And literally, when you're the CEO, and I know this from experience, you're the last one to hear about anything. I mean, there could be all kinds of fires and problems going on. You never hear about it. So this product, and I'm assuming this helps from a marketing, maybe even product ideation, because you're getting customer feedback. You probably can improve your products. So I'm just brainstorming some ideas there. But do you want to share, just so everybody has an idea of where it plugs into the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So we plug into however you are talking to customers. So most businesses will likely have a few different channels where customers are interacting with them. support tickets you mentioned. Maybe they have like a Slack community or Slack channels. Maybe they'll have an email that people are emailing in. Maybe they'll have a chat bot. Maybe they'll have maybe they'll do with like their bigger customers. They might have video calls that they do with them or their suppliers or the distributors. And so what we do is we plug into all of those different channels and we use large language models to analyze every single customer interaction. And what we're trying to do is basically two things. One is we find that because there's so many different things, so many communications happening all the time across so many customers and across so many channels, that most of the time what those customers are saying doesn't flow through to the right people in the organization. Someone has product feedback, it doesn't always make it to the product team. Someone has service and support feedback, it doesn't always make it to the manager. Someone has like brings up a competitor or some alternative, it doesn't make it to the CEO. And so the first thing we do is we make sure everything that matters to the different people on the team is automatically routed to them and they get to see it, so that everyone is informed of what customers are saying. The second major value proposition is that as humans, we don't have the capacity to take all of this information that's coming at us and find the patterns. Way too often, we make decisions based on the few loud customers or the rep who heard something who's like more adamant about it than others. And so what we do is we look across all the things that came in and we help identify the patterns. What's coming up most frequently? What's coming up less frequently? What are the things that are changing over time? And in that way, we give you a more systematic way of making decisions, whether it's, what does the market look like? How are trends changing? What are the things that people like? What are the things that people don't like? What are my strengths, weaknesses? How do I compare to competitors? These are all things that we're constantly reacting to. But if we don't have real data and real patterns to react to, we're basically guessing. And with our product, you have the data on what it is that customers truly value and want.
Okay, cool. So let's jump into that and start out with, for CEOs today, can you rank, and if we can focus this around a product, physical product, what are the top 3 pain points, or how does this product help solve those pain points?
Yeah, well, I think every CEO I know is thinking about tariffs. That's obviously a very, very big deal. And if you think about tariffs, it's really a component of pricing. And so everyone has sensitivity around, am I pricing things the right way? How should I think about how much room do I have to pass on some of the costs? How much room do I not have? What is the elasticity of that curve? And so being able to actually look through all of the comments that people have made and all the interactions that have been had around pricing and understand what is that elasticity, how are they reacting, and then as you make changes to be able to in real time monitor how those are impacting customers is a really, really big deal. And that's something that I think every CEO needs to be thinking about and really gathering data on, because this is not a subject that you have to react very quickly, but it's not when you want to react based on gut. The the second one that I see a lot is just because of, oh, sorry about that. Siri just went off on me. Yeah. The other sorry about that. The other thing that we hear a lot is that when it comes to physical products, there's just a longer lead time in terms of inventory and forecasting how much of it you need and what SKUs you want. And again, being able to actually understand, like, not just the order volume, but in the different interactions, what people are talking about, what they're asking about, what they're caring about, is a really helpful frame to be able to think about that part of the business. And then the last one is you're constantly iterating on every piece of your business, how you deliver support, how you deliver customer satisfaction, which products are resonating, which ones have issues. Like, all of that becomes incredibly helpful to be able to think about merchandising and support and just generally how you run the business.
Yeah, I can see all those being helpful, really helpful. And you're right, the pricing one's the biggest. And then especially the last one, because I think there's a lot of that can go to marketing. It can go to even logistics, improving the product. If something's getting damaged all the time, like, we hear about those things, but sometimes, if it's, you only hear about it when it becomes a fire. And sometimes people don't act on everything they hear about. They just hear about things and they don't act on it. So before we move on, what's the output of the product? So all this information's going in, and actually, just to clarify, so are phone conversations going in as well if you have like customer service team?
Yeah, as long as you're recording them, then
Yeah.
we can ingest them. And yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that because that's a ton of information, right? So you're getting all that information in. You're going to meet the client wherever they communicate with with their customers, and then how is that output? How is that actually digested? Because that's a lot of information.
Yeah. So there are three primary ways that it gets that you can interact with the data. The first is we actually chart absolutely everything. So you can see trends and patterns. And so, like if you're looking at pricing, we'll trend out the positive pricing discussions versus the negative ones, and are they going up or down? And then you can click in and see exactly what those conversations and what the people were talking about. And if you want to look at like the support issues, like anything that you want to track, you can plot, and it's a very visual dashboard that looks a lot like a BI tool. The second way that you can access the data is through our analysis module, where we basically have something like 30 reports that we can run for you based off of that data. So you might have one which is like which product SKUs are resonating the most and which ones are not, or what are the support issues that we're having, or whatever it is. We have 30 deep dive analysis that we can run on demand across um, your entire communication stack. And then the third is the real time routing, where anyone on the team can say the things that matter to me are X, Y, and Z. And anytime a customer is talking about these things or bringing them up, I want to know about it. And so if you're the CEO, you might say, I really want to hear about, tariff related stuff or pricing related stuff. And then as they come in, they get flagged and they get sent to you either in Slack or via email or as a report. And the product team can look for merchandising type stuff, and the support team. And so everyone basically gets to create their own feedback loop and have almost be a fly on the wall across every conversation, but only have to listen to the things that matter to them and what they're trying to act on.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Tons of data. Tons of data. So, I mean, that
Tons of
could
data.
probably be used by every part of it. It could be the CEO. I could definitely see marketing and product. Okay. So before we go on, because I want to ask sort of, you know, how, what this looks like before and after for a company. But before we get there, Eli, tell me about, so this is an AI first company. So how should people be thinking? How should builders, CEOs right now be thinking about AI? Let me just give you a couple quick thoughts, and you're the expert. You're in it every day. So I'm using it quite a bit, but not for automation yet because I keep my business simple. But I probably should be doing more automation. But it's AI. So you're building your company, and I'm sure there's different automations you can do. And the idea here is what should just CEOs of Shopify stores and Amazon stores be doing? But AI is changing so quick too, right? So if we do something now, in 6 months, could that be, not valuable because there's so much iteration happening? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is the wild, wild west when it comes to AI. And every day it feels like there are new tools that are coming out that are really leveraging AI in very neat and innovative ways. I would say the first thing that I would do, and this is what we do internally, is we just take one like the general purpose LLMs like Claude or ChatGPT, and we make sure that any process that we're doing as individuals, if there are ways to speed them up with one of those, that we start to use it, because that really gets the brain flowing in terms of just what's possible and what
Mm,
are things that we can do with it. And there's a ton of stuff that can be quasi automated, but it also means that you're in the middle of it and you can see the output, the quality, and you can refine it. And examples of this are, the easiest example, and this is an obvious one, but it's just an easy one to grasp. So I'll go with it. But like after a call, I would take the transcript from the video call that I had with a potential partner or customer, and I would put it into Claude, and I would say, "Hey, help me come up with a follow up email." Right. After a
mm,
while, I started to see what was good, what was bad. I started to refine my prompt, and eventually I set it up so it was automatic. I use a company called Relay.app, and I set a workflow that after every call, it would automatically take the transcript, send it to an LLM, get back the thing, and send it to me as an email. So now I had the follow up as a draft, just ready to go. And to me, that's the example of like the process or the evolution that I would go through. I wouldn't try to take something and start by automating the hell out of it, because these LLMs are incredibly powerful, but they're also a little bit fickle. And the
mhm.
more that you can like really try to get that use case dialed down, the better off you'll be, and then you can start automating it. So and we do this across almost every dimension. Like another example is before a sales call, I would do a deep research report on using ChatGPT on the person, take all of the things that I'd learned, and then I put that in to another cloud project, and I would then have like a nice little summary going into that conversation. And now we've gotten it to a point where it's tight enough and it's automated. And there's just so many places across the business. It's almost just how far and wide can your imagination go to figure out what's possible.
Yeah, it seems that way. And I just learned about this other feature. I know deep research, but I just learned about for chat, I guess it's the version 3.0, where it's sort of in between deep research. It thinks for like, 10 to 30 seconds. So it gives you a better response than your typical response would be. So yeah, there's so much going on there. Okay, so suppose we're working with, or you're working with a, say $10 to $30 million physical product brand. Maybe they have an e-commerce, a Shopify. Maybe they also sell on Amazon. Tell us, tell us what it looks like before they've worked with you, so that you know where they're getting their data from, right? They have different ways they're getting, they're communicating with the customer. What does it look like before, and what does it look like after they're working with you, and how long does it take for that onboarding?
Yeah. So the onboarding is super fast. It's a 15-minute process to connect the different tools into our system. And then we go through a little bit of work on our side, but within 24 hours, um, they're set up and running. And the before and after are pretty stark. The before typically looks like a lot of data scattered in a bunch of different places, and a lot of people spending a lot of time trying to report up and down and sideways across every decision. So we talked about merchandising. The whoever's merchandising is probably looking at inventory data. They're probably looking at sell-through data. They're probably trying to like do some searches to try and figure out what feedback people have had. And it's just like a messy process. And then someone's trying to compile all of this and try to make some decisions on it. With back engine, you basically have everything you need at your fingertips immediately. You can run a feedback search, get exactly what people like about the product, what they don't like about the product, what the issues were, where the gaps were. You basically have all of it consolidated, so you can make really fast merchandising decisions, taking in the complete set of information that customers have called in and dialed in about. And so that's one example. Another example is, as an executive, oh, I know that me personally as a CEO, I ping the CS team very frequently to just, or a support team, just very frequently to try and figure out what are customers saying, what are the issues we're having with our business, what do I need to prioritize, and eventually I formalize that into a weekly meeting with them, where anecdotally I hear back from customers. That's not a very efficient way of making sure that you are acting on the things that need to be acted on. And so now I have a weekly report that comes in, because we dog food our own product. So weekly report that tells me this is the voice of the customer. This is what they're saying.
Mm.
Another thing is, when companies try to have like a sense of customer happiness, typically they're using like an NPS or a CSAT type score, which is survey based, which is a fraction of the customers are leaving some feedback behind, and that's what they're using to gauge, just like, are we doing good or not. With back engine, we're actually scoring every single interaction, and so we give you a real-time live view across 100% coverage, and let you see what that's looking like and helping you track it, which means that you start identifying issues way before. So basically, to summarize all of it, we just take a lot of the things that companies are already doing, we supercharge it, and we reduce a ton of the work to get to that point, and we just help businesses make more data-driven decisions.
Yeah, I like that the onboarding, because some of these, the first thing I say as a CEO is, gosh, okay, how much time is it going to take me or my team? I mean, price is one consideration, right? But the other one is resources. So it sounds like a lot of this is automated, it just plugs in, these dashboards are already kind of put together, and you start seeing all that information, which is super valuable. How do you guys handle pricing? What can you share on that?
Yeah, so pricing is just based on the volume of interactions that are coming in through the system. And
Mhm.
so we just do a quick assessment to understand what that looks like, and we can come up with the pricing. But generally um it's not a super significant part of the budget. It's not a huge amount. It's just
Mhm.
hard for me to give without any um but like just to try and give you some concrete data, so it's
Mhm.
not so abstract. a business doing something like $5 million of revenue would probably be talking about twelve to $18,000 a year,
Okay.
roughly.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. Now, what about a company? So again, for the product CEOs out there. So let's look at where we are today, especially if you're consumer products. Okay. You got tariffs. You're competing directly against Chinese copycats, but more than that, you're just competing against your factories who decided they can just sell here and they don't need you. So that's basically that's difficult because they're going to have pricing advantage coming in. You might have a better brand. You might have some other moats that you control here, but they're coming to take your lunch. So the way I look at it is you have to win at all, tactically at all these touch points with the customer. Okay, so you have to, if you have 100 products, you got to see where they are at all your listings. Could be your site, but of course Amazon and all the retailers you're listed on, and you have to win every one of those products. And most companies are not set up that way. They just kind of have the hope and pray model. They price it, and then at the end of the month, they find out how much they sold. But you literally got to win every time. And so that's what I like about this idea, because here you're getting very specific points of data that you can make adjustments and hopefully beat the competition, right? You're going to have a data advantage if they're not using it. So, I kind of wanted to think about that. So what if a company comes to you? So give me an idea of where the data is coming from. So what if someone comes to you and they're like, well, we just have email and tickets. Is that common? Or are you usually able to say, no, Mr. Businessman or businesswoman, what about these other touch points that maybe they never thought about, and you gather data from that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's super business dependent. Our philosophy is to build all the integrations so that wherever that business is talking to customers, we're not the blocker. We can integrate and we can collect it. But if a business is just keeping it simple and like the only way to get in touch with them is support at whatever their domain is, like that's fine too, because at the end of the day, like, the idea is to just collect everything the customers say, and if that's the only place that customers are talking to them, that's fine. But
Hmm.
typically, most businesses will have more than one channel, and so it's just some of them have WhatsApp, like whatever they have, like we will want to work with them through to gather that information.
Yeah. Now, do you guys integrate with like Bazaar Voice, or do you take that data, or do they do their own thing? Because they're obviously with customer reviews. There's quite a bit of data in there.
Yeah, so we haven't integrated with them, but we have integrated with other review sites, and it's a pretty quick integration. So we've got a long backlog of integrations that we're constantly working, and we'll get to them pretty soon.
Yeah. And what about just back to the CEO? What do you think are the most valuable metrics? I know you talk about pricing and stuff, but as far as your dashboards go,
Yeah.
what do you think? What's typically on a CEO dashboard from your data?
So sentiment is number one. So
Oh,
generally,
sentiment.
sentiment,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So sentiment up or down, how's that trending? How's that changing?
Uh-huh.
Why is it changing? Another one is uh, basically competitive mentions. How often are competitors and which competitors are being mentioned and
Mm.
in what context? We talked about pricing, service and support, product pain versus product love. Like, are people calling because they love the product or they don't love the product? And specifically, what are they saying? Um, those are the ones that we see most often. We also see a lot of companies, if you have suppliers, also ingesting those conversations with suppliers and building some dashboards around what those suppliers are saying, and
Hmm.
also with customers. So if you're selling through retailers as well, and you consider them your customers, and you want to make sure that they're selling through, those are also interactions that you probably want to be tracking and monitoring.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see sentiment being really, it's almost like NPS, almost, you could
Yeah,
probably
but
see that as a line. And if it goes down, you're like, okay, there's something going on here and you got to dive in.
yeah, but it's I think more powerful than NPS because NPS is derived from a tiny fraction of your customer base who take the time to
Mm.
answer, and they do so quite infrequently. Whereas what we're doing is we're building it off of the backs of like every interaction that you have. So it's both more real time and I think more accurate.
Hmm. Okay, so let's finish up. So every business owner wants to eventually sell their company. Actually, that's actually what I try to do with the clients I work with. They usually have a couple years to prepare for that. So looking back at your exits, and I know they were both sound like they were both in the software space, but what customer metrics were most important? It sounds like you found some good synergistic buyers, right? Not PE buyers, but still, what just to share for the CEO, what was on your mind as far as metrics, and how did you build that to know you're going to get the best valuation of multiple?
I mean, the best metric is revenue and growth, right? If you've got those in place and profitability in this environment, not as much when I sold my companies, but now it matters quite a bit.
That's funny. Yeah.
But those are the metrics that matter most. Beyond that, they're looking at gross margins and they're looking at the operational efficiency, and investors are looking at different things. But I actually don't think that's why we sold. I think the
Mhm.
reason, or why we were acquired, I think the reason was because there was a strategic story that they bought in. And that's a lot of
Mhm.
times what I tell CEOs is that in addition to making sure that you've built a great company and a great product and you have the right metrics, you've got to be evangelizing why what you're doing matters, and making sure that acquirers are buying what you're selling, that they believe in your vision. Because at the end of the day, unless you get to um, a size where they're buying you for what you are today and for the metrics you have today, they're probably buying you because they feel like as part of their inventory, as part of their portfolio, they could do so much more with it. And so they really need to believe in the vision. And that was where I spent most of my time, is making sure that I was building relationships with the potential acquirers and making sure that they understood what it was, that where I thought the world was going and why I thought what we were doing made sense as part of that future.
And this is great advice, because I think sometimes people do get caught up in the CAC and the turnover and burn rates and all these other things. But you're literally just saying, build a great company with growing revenue, growing profits, like like anybody else would want to, right? So even your current business, I'm sure in the future you're going to want, your venture back. So you raised a round or two or whatever you've done, but you're going to eventually uh, sell the company. So your goal is just build a great company with a story, with a brand, and that's profitable. Sounds like.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's cool. Eli, let's finish up with this then. So fast forward a couple of years, and we kind of talked a little bit about this earlier. AI agents can, draft specs and probably run some of these processes. Um, I don't know, how should people prepare for this? Is there any way to even prepare for what's going to happen, other than what I got out of the first question I asked was, if you're using this for all of your processes, you're going to be very knowledgeable about what the potential uses of the tools would be. So that in and of itself is a great way to prepare. But how can folks think about the future, and how are you doing that as well?
Yeah, I think first of all, I don't think anyone knows where this is all going because it's changing so fast and there's so many people who are building stuff with it. And the core, like we've never really had a reasoning agent like we do LLMs. And it's just very hard to project as they get better what they'll be able to do. But what is clear to me is you just have to like immerse yourself into the world of AI to have any
Hmm.
chance of being able to keep up with where it's going. So beyond like the company itself that we're building that's AI centric, we're also just trying to be AI, like just immerse ourselves in AI. Otherwise, we really will have like anytime there's a new model, we're all over it. Anytime one of the providers builds out a feature, we're all over it. We're constantly looking at new products that are coming out. It's a full-time job, but that's the nature of where we are. This stuff is just changing so fast.
It is. Well, listen, thanks for being a guest and sharing your wisdom, especially from someone who's already exited a couple companies. I mean, that's so valuable for the audience. Where can the audience find you and learn more about Back Engine?
Yeah, absolutely. So backengine.ai online, and my email is eli@backengine.ai, and you can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/eli Portnoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Eli, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Luke.